Here we go. I'm gonna kick us off. So yeah, really excited, really excited to have everyone here. Excited to have David Newkirk as our featured speaker today. This is a collaborative event between Prepare for VC, Startup Grind Boston, and really, came together. We've been working with David as our wellness, one of our wellness champions in the Prepare for VC community. We can share a link along the way to check out some of the on-demand content, he's put together for us as well. But yeah, really, we set these up, these discussions to really learn from entrepreneurs, experts in the community, and, have everybody get to know each other, meet. They're pretty interactive as well. So, any questions you have along the way, feel free to either jump in the chat or unmic and, join us and, ask a question on the virtual stage here as well. So yeah, the goal of this is really, understand the topic we wanted to focus on today is creating sustainable change. And it came about, we were talking about like, in a discussion a few weeks ago, how a lot of times, we're setting goals and things we want to hit in the short term. And there might have even been changes we've made over the pandemic or over, a few month period. But they're not set up to create lasting change. And, part of our discussion here is going to be understanding David's background and expertise as an entrepreneur, getting into some of these topics around, what's worked well for him and his clients and the community there, and also bring in any of the experiences from the audience to figure out like how we can all support and help through any challenges anyone's working through today. So yeah, David, if you want to kick us off with a quick introduction, and then we can go into more of the chat from there. Oh, sorry, you're on mute.
Thanks, Jason. Sorry about that. Good morning to the West Coasters and afternoon to the East Coasters. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to be able to share my experiences and see how that may actually provide some insights and some help to others. So thank you for that. Gratitude. So my background is, it was over 30 years in financial services. Think of me as someone who had every executive hat in every position in the company of different sizes, except for finance, but I'm a finance and econ guy by academic standards. But I worked with small private startups in an executive role. I have worked in large 40,000 person company, private company, public company, you name it. But I have a deep appreciation for the different hats everyone wears, the way that they're all wired to succeed in sales versus operations versus marketing versus finance. But it also allows me to understand the behavior and how behaviors actually have a cause effect and how we are with ourselves. So I've been spending a lot of my time as a multiple time entrepreneur, launching a consulting service specifically focused on entrepreneurs since 2018. And I work with launching lines of business for existing entrepreneurs or helping entrepreneurs launch their business. And so part of that is doing work with people on how to create change in themselves, not just the change from a task within an organization, but also within themselves, because there's always a cause effect, right? When you're an entrepreneur, your personal life and your business life is like this. It's connected. What happens on one side affects the other, versus being an employee, your personal life's your personal life, work is work. It's a little bit different. So I get to work on both sides of that equation to help entrepreneurs have success with the business.
Perfect. And yeah, I know you've started a few different companies with similar missions around helping and supporting entrepreneurs through this process. Like, what was sort of the big leap in realization for you, coming out of the corporate and financial world that made you create something of your own and want to start the businesses that you started?
Yeah, great. I think, thanks for the question. I think the first thing is it's what where all entrepreneurs start. Passion leads us to being an entrepreneur, right? We're very passionate about something. We're passionate about an idea, or we're passionate about something we wanted to realize or experience, but we weren't getting it in the corporate world. And it's sort of like that itch that doesn't get scratched. And then we also understand there's other benefits too, to not to be in necessarily into the corporate umbrella, which is just a sort of freedom in certain ways. So that really is what had driven me. And I like to help people. I like to be in service to people. That's my DNA. So that was what has driven me to be an entrepreneur. Is my passion is actually unlocking success in other people and letting them prosper on their own terms, in their own way, organically for them, how they best do it. So I always say it's not about structure or program for my work. It's important in other work. It's important some of the things that are offered, so much so with Prepare for VC, but just uniquely with my work, I work very organically to the individual. And I like to be able to see someone come out in their own way and be a really successful leader as an entrepreneur.
So when, somebody comes to you, I know you mentioned that it's pretty customized to the founder. Are there typical reasons or, like impetuses for them to come and say, you know what, I actually do need help getting more structured, or, what's the typical process of like figuring out that they do need support from someone like you?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I think it's twofold, right? There's two components. I talked about that integration, right, between the business and the personal life. And from the business perspective, the best way I could describe it is if someone has tried to solve something at minimum twice, and they're not getting the results of change through that effort. A lot of times what I identify is there's a blind spot, which means sometimes you just don't know what you don't know as an entrepreneur, because you have a passion or an expertise in one thing. You don't necessarily have expertise in running all aspects of a business and wearing all those different hats and lenses and perspective. So there's a blind spot of just not knowing that gets uncovered, or it's a self-diagnosis of a problem, which is really a symptom. And so you can't solve a symptom to eliminate a problem, right? So what ends up happening is that's a unique way to describe. It's frustration because they're implementing or trying different things. They're not seeing the progress. And we end up finding out that, it's a symptom, and there's work that can uncover a problem, which creates an aha moment and a different tact, a different strategy to create the change. Then the personal side, though, people come to me, only people who are ready to make change, because change, even on the business side, a lot of times it requires someone to think about changing the way they are as an entrepreneur. So there has to be elasticity with not in the intellectual desire to change, but in here, the true desire to change, because otherwise it's a battle. It's an intellectual rationalization. And so I work with people who are not intellectually trying to create change. They're trying to make change knowing that if they have to change something about themselves, they're cool and they're okay with that. And they know it may come easy or it may come with challenges, but they're okay at least approaching it and addressing it.
Right. Sounds great. So I saw a tweet that kind of went viral the other day on, it was the tweet was along the lines of, if you're not willing to work on Sundays, you're going to fall behind your competitors. And a lot of people were against that, wanted to put mental health and wellness first. Some people were for that and saying, like, you can still be flexible and sort of expand, work on Sundays, but maybe, take a break during the week. Or what's kind of your philosophy on how founders and entrepreneurs should think about how they structure their week?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's a slippery slope. You put 50 people in a room, you'll get 50 opinions and probably some strong convictions on the opinions of an answer to that question. So I'm so glad you brought it up. The person who, I don't know who that was, but I'll describe the person who creates a tweet like that states it as a strong conviction. That worked for them, and they want to self-project what works for them works for everybody else. And that's the first mistake. That's self-projection. Whatever is the container of how they work best and what they need to do to be successful works for them. But that's not a formula for everybody else. Some people can work extremely efficiently in 4 hours in a day, Monday through Friday, because the way their brain is wired, the work that they do, the way they do complex thinking, the way that they actually are just hyper-focused. They could do things in a 20-hour work week. Some people just work Monday through Friday. People put boundaries in and board because it's, for your point, of health and wellness. I have actually personally seen people who have driven themselves to obsession with the business for the sake of success and financial success. And they're not living around here anymore. They've passed. They've died because they've pushed so hard. They let go of health and wellness. And before they were 50, they're no longer here to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Now, if you had asked them, would they have seen that road coming? Absolutely not. So it's all about choices. And for me, freedom of choice and free will means, hey, anyone can have an opinion. Anyone can determine what's best for them. But by no means is there a formula that we should apply for one and say, this is the success model, everybody needs to follow it. Because some people find health and wellness is really important in order to be able to be effective in the workplace. Health and wellness on weekends means I'm super productive Monday through Friday and I get everything done. And that's actually me. I have health and wellness during the day and on weekends. And if you ask anyone who knows me, I'm highly productive, highly, highly productive. I can do things on average, and I have people who could back this up. If it takes someone 3 days to do an intensive document, white paper analysis, I usually can do it in 4 or 5 hours. So I don't need weekends. So it really just varies on the individual and who they are. It's all good. It's all good.
No, that's perfect. So how do you, like, when you're working with a new client, how do you figure out, if they haven't really figured out what works for them yet? How do you take them through the process of trying to, try something new that might work for them? Or is it more like trial and error, or is it kind of prescribing something that would work for them?
Yeah, geez, that's a really good question. That's a really good question. And that deserves a really thoughtful answer because it has layers to it. But it really comes down to, respecting the entrepreneur, they may have certain things that they want to do, certain ways they want to be, certain things that they think are really important. So what we really talk about is from their mindset, and I don't like to use the word mindset, it's overly used all the time, but from their mindset, just in how they view their business and how they view themselves, what are their priorities? What is it that drives them to be really getting a lot of work done? What drives them to distraction? What are the times when they feel like they're behind? What are the times that make them feel like they're ahead? So we deal with situations that describe when things go well, when things don't go well, and we start to understand uniquely to them what are the triggers that create really positive, productive work and success, and what are the triggers that pull them out of that move them sideways and zig and zag. And so we look at both of those and come up with their dynamic, and then from there we come up with a dialogue that talks about, well, why do those triggers pull them out? Why do they need a trigger to pull them in? And we start to understand how their brain works with just what is it that makes them tick. And they usually have some aha moments. And then we look at, okay, based on all of this body of work, what would they like to change versus what would they like to keep the same? They get to stack the board with the pieces as to what they would like to change and what they would like to keep the same. We respect that and we go from there. But my consulting is never telling them what they want to hear. So my ethos is, I'll tell you what you even don't want to hear, but you can decide not to take my advice. You can decide not to do it. I'm cool with that. but you need to hear even the things that you may disagree with, but you get to decide how you feel about it and whether you want to do it. But I have an obligation as a fiduciary to tell you all the things, whether you want to hear them or not, and then you decide. So I don't hold back. I empower them to make the decisions with all the information, all the perspectives, all of the different slices on the look at something. I don't placate to just what they want to hear.
Right. Oh, that sounds
That's
great.
that's really
yeah,
an
no,
important piece, not placating.
yeah, and I like how you describe the ethos of it. And is that sort of what made you, or what led you to, brand the company as Ethos? Or what was,
It was, yeah, actually it was. I'm surprised that, yes, ethos stands for high integrity and high character. And that's just who I am, it's just like, hey, if we're gonna help people, you mentioned for this discussion, sustainable change. It's all about empowering people with knowledge and skills and perspective and insight so they can take that in, decide what they want, and create sustainable change. Because the statistics show that when consultants get hired or coaches, most often after 3 months of all that work, everything just falls apart. It's not sustained, it's not kept. And, the financial impact of the expense, it becomes more of a vacuum. And I really take that seriously, which is I don't want to be wanted all the time or codependent with my clients. I want my clients to feel like I had a great experience with him for X period of time. I'm like so much stronger in where I can go, what I can do. I've got these new techniques or skills or knowledge, and I'm sustaining the change. And nothing makes me happier when I'm just like, when they're not a client anymore and they can sustain not being a client. That's like home run.
right. Are there any common threads or, pitfalls you've seen on creating something that's not sustainable?
Oh, let's see, something that's not sustainable. I think the biggest challenge, there's two things. When the person has high anxiety and stress,
Yep.
that usually creates a problem for change. Because it usually means we've got to unpack what is creating the anxiety and stress that hasn't been discussed when I talked about uncovering all the different aspects of what's happening with them, what their triggers are. Because entrepreneurs, if they feel anxiety and stress financially, there's this rationalization that could go on about why not to do something because the money's not there. And I get that. I mean, we all get that. But the thing that's really unique about entrepreneurs, and I know what your experience is, Jason, it'd be interesting to hear your thought on this. My experience with entrepreneurs are they like to, and I'm an entrepreneur multiple times, they like to want people to buy their product or service, but they don't want to spend money themselves on acquiring product and service to help themselves. So it's like, buy my stuff, but no, I don't want to spend to get the help that I need. I'll do it myself as a DIY or do it yourself. I find that's the biggest issue is when entrepreneurs fall into the DIY, they want to be proficient in everything, and that's noble. But 9 months go by, they're only 40% proficient on what they're trying to tackle, and it's not enough of proficiency to actually be good enough at it to actually make the change. And they lose that time. So they were better off investing in outside help from anybody, regardless of what the solution set is. They're better off because if you can invest short term, whether it's 6 weeks or 3 months or 6 months or whatever the requirement is, and invest the money, and it starts kicking off the revenue that you need, as an example, that's better than doing it yourself over 9 months and not getting any revenue as a result because you're still not proficient enough. You've wasted a lot of time. So to me, that is the biggest issue that comes up, is the rationalization around financial, about should I spend money or not? But at the same time, in my business, I want everyone to buy my stuff. So it's a really inverted way of thinking. Don't spend, but make everyone spend on you.
Right. Yeah, it makes sense. And I mean, because it might be even if it's a shorter term program, the idea is you're coming in and you're gonna change the way they do things for the next, several years and beyond. So, yeah, I guess, it's kind of getting into that mindset of, hey, this isn't just something I'm paying for 4 weeks. It's something I'm paying for what's going to change me over the next few years from here. So yeah, I think definitely,
Yeah, I
um,
think the key thing to
definitely
keep in mind is
similar.
for an entrepreneur, we know that any change that is considered, it should always actually come down to this analysis for anyone. It's real simple. Any change, does it contribute to revenue when the change goes into effect? Does it contribute to reducing my costs? Or does it contribute to customer success? Because any change that addresses any of those three contributes to profitability.
Right.
If it doesn't contribute to profitability, then why do it? Because then you can't measure that financial investment, but you can say it's an investment because it's going to extend and expand my revenue, which makes me more profitable. It's going to cut my costs or scale my costs, which makes me more profitable. Or it addresses customer issues, which maintains and supports recurring revenue, which is something I want to maintain for my business model for valuation. So the big thing about change too is aligning the idea of change and the investment to know how it actually contributes to the success, which is at the end of the day, it's all about the financial success of your business.
Right. Yeah. I I mean, I think it's hard, or definitely, feel that as an entrepreneur too. Like it's there's always something, if I didn't do anything else besides working, like I'd have enough, um there's enough things I want to build and create from here that could fill, 24/7 without sleeping. But, I know you need to sleep. I know, I need, or personally, like I need to have a good amount of socialization to
Yep.
be happy too. And I like or whatever, as some exercise and wellness, do it because it's healthy. Others I do it because it's fun.
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, it's always like, hey, I'm doing this. Could I be working now, or should I actually be doing this? And yeah, it's definitely a balancing act there too.
Yeah, it is. It's not, and let's face it, we know that a time is a function of being successful. So sometimes we really do have to sacrifice, hopefully only short term, some health and wellness activities for the sake of just getting the business going. That's understandable.
Right. Yeah, I wanted to bring in a question from Scott here. And Scott, if there's anything else you want to add as we go into it, feel free to unmic and ask as well. But yeah, he's asking, do you see greater growth with individuals who are iterative versus purely prescriptive? And does either approach offer longer term sustainability?
Oh, it's a great question. Thanks, Scott. So wow, that's a really good question. So yes, iterative versus prescriptive. So I'm going to take a little liberty and interpret that a little bit, and feel free to tell me if I've missed it on my interpretation. I'm totally good with that. Iterative means there's curiosity and willingness to change. Iterative means new versions of yourself or new versions of your business. And you realize that sometimes is a function of just being able to move forward. So an iterative mindset is awesome. I think that is probably what creates the best success for an entrepreneur. When it's prescriptive, that's okay too. It just means the person who's an entrepreneur, their mind is different, they're wired differently, and they may be more task oriented, more very specific outcome oriented, and drive towards a very focus of tasks to create outcomes and so forth. And that's not a bad thing either. I think it's the balance of two. It's sort of like the yin and the yang in the business world, where you bring those two together. So the question is, can someone be prescriptive and allow themselves to be a little bit iterative in moving forward? If someone's fully iterative, they may not have some of the disciplines that they could benefit from by taking some prescriptions, where everything isn't just all about change. So I think maybe it's the balance of holding both. To what level, that's really to the individual, but I think that would be the key. That's a really good question. I like that one a lot.
Perfect. Yeah, I just want to, mention too, I mean, I'm going to keep going through some questions here, but yeah, if anybody wants to, you can either raise your hand through the reactions button, ask something in the chat, or just on mic and join us as well. But yeah, so on, that topic of the prescriptions versus, kind of iterative process there, like, is it, I guess, do you find, your clients usually have something, is it focusing on the wellness, for
Mhm.
example, wellness areas they enjoy the most, or is it focusing on, like, hey, you might not enjoy lifting weights as much, but you should be doing that, or you might not be somebody that's, into yoga, but you should try it out and see if that's
Yeah.
what helps you reset here.
Yeah, so I think that this is great because we could pull in Scott's question about if someone's iterative versus prescriptive and how that actually impacts your question about health and wellness, right? So here would be an example of my experience of a prescriptive person. No judgment from me, but just my experience of what it's like. Someone who's prescriptive is, I have anxiety and stress. I have to do meditation every morning. Otherwise, in order to not be stressed in the morning, get my work done. That's prescriptive. It's feeling of I have to do this. If I don't, my day is off and I'm not going to be productive. That's really tied into a prescriptive methodology and mindset. The iterative process mindset would be someone would be like, when I meditate, I come up with some really good ideas that I end up coming out and I feel like I can create and troubleshoot a problem a lot better. And so, they're like, oh, this is helping me solve things. This is helping me think about things, from a different approach. So meditation, as an example, in health and wellness, can serve both the prescriptive person and serve the iterative person, or serve someone who's holding both. So health and wellness is great because it doesn't serve just one person in one way. Health and wellness, whether it's yoga or going running, right? Running releases endorphins, right? It puts you in a good mood. It helps you not be depressed or in a bad mood or seeing things negative for the day. You see positivity. So it's really health and wellness. We can really see how it plays a huge role. Health and wellness impacts your state of mind so that as you deal with unplanned events throughout the day that may trigger stress, or you're dealing with planned events, either way, you're benefiting by bringing in something good that makes things at least a little bit easier than if you don't do health and wellness. So the question would be for an entrepreneur, if you could do something that just enhances making everything better when you're working on the business, and even health and wellness does that, why not do it?
Perfect. Yeah, and then, when we talk about, I mean, a lot of the founders and entrepreneurs, you're working with and that are on this call too, have other teams around them. So,
Yeah.
When we're trying to figure out, for example, could even be either like something wellness related to offering, or even simple as like, hey, we want to find the most productive meeting times during the day that works for everyone.
Mhm.
How do you manage, especially as the team is getting bigger in most startups over time, how founders and entrepreneurs think about, like, including other people in their wellness decision,
Yeah.
or their decisions there.
Wow. Wow, you are loaded with good questions today. I can't remember the last time I would say good question, because usually that can be like, oh, that's just like a complimentary thing. But I'm like, no, these are really good questions. So here's what's really interesting. In the traditional corporate world, the meetings are set by the person who's running the meeting, or who's more an authoritative position to say, everyone work around my schedule, everyone work for me based on what I've set. And that's very a top-down approach. But we know that in a lot of ways, society, and definitely in the entrepreneurial world, everything is built around collaboration, right? You have Agile, you have Scrum, you have all these things, all that talk about collaboration, one huge long desk, everyone sits around one long desk, no one sits in separate offices in isolation anymore. So imagine being an entrepreneur, having a team, you're building collaboration, you're building this openness, you're trying to break away from those top-down things. And then you say, well, as the manager, as the entrepreneur owner, this is my time when you all have to schedule around it. Right? What about the people who are morning people? What about the people who are more night people? Right? Some people actually are like, I'm so much more effective after 2 cups of coffee. I'm so effective in the morning. That's when I do. I fade at 4 in the afternoon. Actually understanding what is the performance cycle of the individuals. And then when you bring the individuals into the group, how can you find a common thread where their cycles all intervene with each other in the right way? Pick that time. Pick the time which is most optimal. Instead of forcing people to just attend because it's a mandatory meeting, figure out what is the cycle of everybody and see how much you can find a common thread. The larger the group, the harder it is. But even in the 80-20 rule, if you can find a common thread for the cycle of 80% shared and 20 can't by exception, that's better than having it significantly less because you're just picking a time in the day that works for yourself.
I like that. Yeah. If you're building collaboration on everything else, you can't forget about collaborating with your team and creating, that structured or open environment to, make it work for the most amount of people that you can make it work for.
Yeah, exactly. For example, let's say the boss and the entrepreneurial boss or the manager is a night bird. And they're like, we're always going to have meetings at 5 o'clock because that's the one they like to do because they like to stay busy during the day. And they're like, I only like to have meetings at 5. What's it like for everybody that feels burnt by the time they're 5? It's 5 o'clock. But it satisfies the manager who says, well, I like having meetings at 5 o'clock at the end of the day. Okay, great. But your staff is burnt out, so you're not going to get the input, the productivity. And then we fall into the same traps. This is what I say. And people may disagree, which is totally fine. We still fall into the trap of niceties, which is people participate and just support whatever the leader of the meeting says. That's not collaboration. Collaboration isn't finding the time to convene. Collaboration is, are you really collaborating, or are people genuinely actually just saying yes? Because it's the end of the day, it's 5, they want to go home, they want the meeting to be short. They're not going to share that. They're not going to share if the meeting doesn't work for them. They're not going to share if they're thinking about getting home. They're not going to share about any issues with their kids, if they have any. They're just going to be quiet in the meeting, because the more quiet they are, the quicker the meeting gets over. So there's a whole behavioral aspect that leaders and entrepreneurs could benefit by having a second insight into.
Oh, I think that's great. Yeah, and it definitely makes sense, the examples you gave too on times that might not be the best for meetings as well.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, wanna again, good point from Jody on treating team like an internal customer.
Oh, totally. Yes. So can I piggyback on that comment?
Sure.
Because I'm going to say, Jody, exclamation point on that. When I graduated from college and I had my first job, I was fast-tracked after 9 months the management program, training program. This investment firm was pretty cool. It was in downtown Boston, but they were very progressive at the time. And what was really cool about it is they actually set a whole program in place that said you had to treat your employees and other departments you work with as your internal customer. And you actually had to treat them like you treated external customers. It was amazing how the culture that was evolved with what Jody said. When that culture is not a thought, it's a practice. unbelievable results. It's a fantastic way to be with a business.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It kind of reminds me, I was, it might have even been a TikTok video or something, but it was basically talking about this employee, or he worked at a Four Seasons hotel as well as another hotel in the same area, like doing two different shifts. And you know, in the Four Seasons one, you could tell like he went above and beyond and everything, just because all the managers would come by and say like, hey, how can I make your job easier? Versus the other hotel, it was like, I'm gonna, you know, make sure that you're doing all of your tasks and like kind of micromanage you. So
Mhm.
yeah, creating that environment where, you know, you kind of feel like you're being treated as a customer, as somebody they want to keep there for the long term, rather than you know, somebody that's there just to work for your startup and earn, or work for your
Yeah.
company and earn a paycheck.
Yeah, you bring up, can I piggyback on the comment you made about micromanaging? Because I think that's a really important point, if I may. I like this expression. Because micromanagers are micromanaging for a fear of things not getting done, right? So they micromanage to try to feel like they understand things are getting done because of the importance they're feeling on it and the importance if it doesn't get done. It's like a whole mindset thing. But what that does in micromanaging is it sends a message to the employees, even though it's not the intention of the micromanager or the micromanaging entrepreneur, but it does send a message that says, I don't trust you. And it builds what I call quiet resentment in the employees or the team. Because micromanaging is a way of saying, I have to check on you because I can't trust and believe you're getting it done unless I do my check-ins with you or constantly micromanage you. Here's the expression. You hired somebody because you thought they could do the job, and you've done the good vetting process. So assume they're going to succeed. Let them succeed. Don't assume they're going to fail. Let them show you they can succeed without micromanaging. Don't assume they're going to fail without micromanaging. And that is a huge game changer, because people really need to be given the opportunity to prove they can be successful. They can't, no matter what, in micromanaging, they cannot prove they're successful because the mindset is assuming there's failure without the intervention.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And um definitely comes up, I feel like, too. You know, a lot of times it's not even the intent of going out and micromanaging. It's like you're giving somebody or you're bringing somebody on for responsibility, but you're not ready to like give up the responsibility. So is
Yeah.
that something you deal with a lot too?
Yeah, it is. I mean, isn't that not the biggest issue for an entrepreneur? Is because when you start, when you're small, before you have teams, you have to do everything, right? You're doing so much of it. And sometimes it's hard to let go. You're so emotionally invested in everything that it's hard to emotionally let go and provide an emotional level of delegated trust, right? Or blind trust to people you just onboarded. So there is work that needs to be done. If we go back to Scott when he talked about iterative versus prescriptive, here's the difference. An iterative person understands more how to implement delegation and trust. A prescriptive person says, I need you to prove to me first you can do it before I trust you. Right? You
Right.
hired a person not to prove that you can be trusted. You hired them because you're supposed to trust them because they're qualified. They went through the process. You just need to start delegating and let them do it. So this is where the prescriptive gets in the way versus the iterative person could be a little bit less restrictive in terms of the management style. But yeah, that's a big thing. Letting go. Yeah, that's some work. There's a lot of emotional investing there, and it's hard to let go of emotions.
Yeah, I mean, even you mentioned at the beginning of the chat, like wearing many hats as a founder. It's something, we talk about a lot
Mhm.
at prepare for VC programs too, is like, maybe right now you're wearing 5 or 10 different roles, but part of the reason you're going through and going to be either growing your sales or raising funding is going to be expanding that team, bringing other people on, and you're
Mhm.
going to give a few of those hats away, but you're still going to choose, kind of figuring out like what you want to do in the company for the long term, where you need to be to manage everything, and what you can give off to like somebody else that can lead a particular category or role there.
Yeah, it really brings up, to your point, Jason, it really brings up the issue of control,
Right.
right? And it's that idea of needing to control things for everything to work, to stay on plan, to get executed, to be delivered, to get the success. But the idea of control is what happens in the idea of not having complete control, which means that you delegate. It's that pyramid effect. Where the entrepreneur starts to hit failure is through too much control, because they create this narrow pipe, the funneling effect of all this work stalls because it can't move until it's reviewed by the entrepreneur or it's reviewed by the team manager. And they slow the process down because they force everything through control to go through them first, because they have that whole idea of one micromanaging. So what happens is you actually lose productivity, you lose results, and you lose the speed of getting things done and seeing change and progress. Sustainable change doesn't happen the more control you have. The idea is, if I control it, I'm controlling the change. But actually what you're doing is you're slowing down the change to such a snail's pace. You're preventing it from actually occurring because your team can make it happen.
Yeah, and I mean that's supposed to be the reason, or part of the reason, startups are able to be successful, is they can move
Yeah,
quicker and try more things out earlier on than large corporate companies. So yeah, you kind of
yeah.
have to take advantage of that and let the people in your organization try out different things too.
Yeah, and don't, and I think it's easier for me to say it than it's hard to live it. I get it, being a multiple time entrepreneur. Sometimes it just takes one employee that you brought on, you gave trust to, where it didn't work out, and you think you need to do micromanaging now as a result, because for everybody else that you bring on board, right? So there's a whole thing too, which is not. Now we talked about triggers. What's a trigger to go zig and zag? A trigger would be someone that you really heavily needed to rely on, you brought on board, it didn't work out, and you think now you always have to start micromanaging whoever is in that role going forward, when really it's not. Maybe that was just a bad hire, and it's reassessing the hiring process and what you were looking for and what you need, and how do you vet it out better so you can still not be a micromanager, put another person in, and still get what you wanted when you thought you were having it with the first person, right? But you don't want that to be a trigger to change your behavior and start micromanaging because of the failure.
Right. Yeah, I know, I've definitely heard like a lot of stories of I've had a founder has had a bad experience with a co-founder, so they don't want another
Yeah.
co-founder in their new company. They've had a bad experience with a venture fund, so they don't want to go venture funding, but it could just be that one
Mm-hmm.
individual or that one group that they've worked with in the past that wasn't the right fit for them, or
Yeah.
wasn't the right fit for the role either.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had my first firm that I did, I had two business partners, and there was a time when we didn't see eye to eye on the direction of the firm and what the priorities were. And it does create issues. I worked for a venture capital funded firm, a tech firm. I was brought on board by 3 partners. Those 3 partners didn't get along, but what ended up happening is those partners were trying to create allegiances amongst the employees. So one of the challenges really is, if an entrepreneur is not a solo entrepreneur with a team or with a business, but has business partners, that dynamic actually is really, really important, which is how do you get entrepreneurial partners to be in sync and stay in sync.
Right. Yeah, especially I mean, could even have been, everybody's in sync at the beginning, but then, the ideas grow, the growth visions
Yes.
grow, and they might grow differently. So
Yes.
yeah, keep everyone in sync on what the actual mission and vision is and how to do it.
Yeah, that's a fun experience, like as you described it when that unfolds. Yeah, it's all good, but it just presents some short-term challenges to
Right.
work through. Sure. Yeah.
See, we got a couple questions in the chat. Yeah, Joema says, what would you do, or what would you avoid if you're starting a company now? Or I guess, yeah, he's starting a company now, wants to know if there's any like roadblocks or mistakes to avoid when you're kind of launch at the very beginning of your venture.
Yes, there's one. It's funny. As soon as you read it, it just came right to me instantaneously, which is, don't fall in love with your idea. And I'm serious. You can be proud of your idea. You can like your idea a lot, but the moment you fall in love with it, you lose rationalization and understanding and the ability to make change. Because now you love it so much, you're focused on just making it work. And if things need to be tweaked or changed, with the core of that, stay intact. But there's resistance because you're so in love with it. You just want it to go as you've designed it. That's where I see a lot of entrepreneurs stumble out of the gate, is they love what they created too much and they're resistant to change.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah, don't
yeah.
fall in love with it. Like it a lot, be proud of it, promote it, go after it, chase it, do what you want to do with it. Just don't fall in love with it.
Right. And you could still be, you can fall in love with what you're doing and without it being tied to like the actual product itself.
Yeah, totally. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Right. Cool. Yeah. Anybody, we got about 10 minutes left here. Oh, got another question here too. If anybody does want to ask directly, you can either raise your hand with this button here, or how do I lower? There we go. Or on mic and ask too. But yeah, I'll ask the question in the chat from Alusola. How do you ascertain for sure that you do not need to have regulatory approval for your startup?
Okay, say that one more time. I missed it though. You said, how do you ascertain? And I'm sorry, I didn't hear the
It
other
was
part.
about sorry, how do you ascertain if you need regulatory approval to start your startup?
So I'm sure you have insight on that. I'll share some insight just because I used to, in financial services, is a regulated industry. If you want to do a startup there in financial services, even in the ecosystem, sometimes as a technology firm supporting investment firms, it's all regulated. So the first question I would say is an easy layup answer, which is the industry you want to support with your product a regulated industry? Because not every industry is regulated per se.
Right.
Right. That would be the first step, would be, and then look at the competition. Who is the competition that you are competing with? Do those competitors in your research, are they regulated in any way? And your target market and your segmentation strategy within your target market. Does your research show that they are required to be regulated? Do they have to do annual reports, annual filings, annual training, certification? You can definitely look at your target market and your segments within that market, as well as your competition, to flesh some of that out.
Yeah, no, that's perfect. Like even and there can be a few different pathways within your market
Mm,
too, if there's to couple examples like in the drug industry,
yeah.
anything that's considered a drug is going to be a
Mhm.
regulated sector, but then there's like this side categories like supplements that aren't as right or regulated through the process. Then there's going to be in the financial services, highly regulated securities, but then some other spaces that aren't, they're not securities, they're more managing other transactions or I don't, yeah, I mean, you could go on different tangents in any industry too, but yeah, it's kind of
Mhm.
figuring out what's similar to you, seeking the right advice on whether it's like legal experts or industry experts and you know, um figuring out if it is a new industry that you're creating, what that's gonna fall into to under regulatory approval. Yeah. And like even on it was kind of bigger or yeah, bigger before the pandemic too, but like on the bike and ride share or the bike share and the scooter sharing ones, like there weren't really rules against it, but there were places where, some of the companies just put 20, 50 scooters on the street and we're getting
Mhm.
complaints from the city to took them all away. And then other ones, they talked with the city first and got city approval before they actually went in. So, they were able to operate in those areas. So yeah, some of it's like just making sure, you talk with the right organizations, either government based or, other official organizations to, make sure everybody's on your side or on your team with you to help the benefits that you're trying to make in the world.
Yeah, if I could add to that, Jason, because as I'm listening to you, it's prompting me one more extended answer, which is that it's important to the reason why the question was so important is because the regulatory piece and knowing that impacts your financial cost to run the business successfully against the constant costs that you may have to incur to meet and sustain regulatory approval and support. So that has to be factored into your financials, which is huge for an entrepreneur. The other thing too is that there's different levels of impact with regulatory, right? Some regulatory could be, yeah, you have to do it. You submit this applications each year, you do this maintenance filing, so on and so forth. It's easy. But what if it's with government and you have to get like certain approvals? It may take 6 months to get approved, to get reviewed, or 9 months. And then you have to deal with this lobby group and all sorts of stuff. So understanding the regulatory body and how long it would take to get approval and what the regular investment cost is to stay approved, I think that's something important. That raised a very good question that's something that should be vetted in the business model before launching the business, if possible.
Yeah. Any other final questions here? I'm gonna share a couple links in the chat too. And David, if there's anything you want to share in terms of websites or places for people to reach out and connect and follow with you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, people can actually just reach out to me at it's called Ethos Consulting. It's not the actual website. Ethos Consulting was not available, so it's Ethos Consults with an S, CONSULTS.com. Actually celebrating 5 years. So I'm actually going through a
Congrats.
rebrand. So later this month, you'll see a new logo, you'll see a new web layout, color scheme, all of that. And so the heart of the content will be similar, but there'll be some differences. So just letting you know, celebrating 5 years successfully. So if anyone does decide to check out ethosconsults.com, it'll look different in a couple of weeks than it does now. And we're proud of that, celebrating 5 years.
Excited to see that rollout, and
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for asking.
yeah, perfect. Oh, and yeah, happy to share. Scott's asking for LinkedIn's too. Yeah, I'll share mine, and yeah, let's, this is a community here, so definitely connect with each other too. Everybody else came out with similar interests and joining, and learning from our speakers like David, learning from the community here. So yeah, definitely
Can
connect.
I throw something else out there, Jason, to the community? I
Exactly.
do a lot. I enjoy actually 30-minute one-on-ones. If someone wants to do a 30-minute one-on-one just to have a conversation, and maybe you have a burning question that's outside of this that you want to, vet out, reach out to me at my email. It's my initial D for David, Newkirk, Newkirk at ethosconsults.com. So it's D Newkirk. Feel free to reach out. We'll set up 30 minutes. And if I can help you in 30 minutes, solve something that's really pressing for you or help with a direction or a perspective, sometimes there's nothing more fun and gratifying than doing that. So I just want to lay that out there to all of your community, Jason.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. I mean, as you can tell, yeah, everyone that joined us today, oh, sure. Yeah, let me post that. Yeah, there's a reason we brought David on the chat here. He offers great advice and insight, so definitely take advantage of his kind offer to the community here. And yeah, if there's anything else, we can help each of you on your startup ventures too. Feel free to reach out. We have a variety of partners, resources, programs, and other upcoming events we'll be putting together as well. So yeah, really appreciate everybody joining us, jumping in. Great questions in the chat, and yeah, really excited to see everybody take all the advice here, put it into action, and continue to grow your ventures.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for having me. It's always a blessing to be able to spend some quality time with you and prepare for VC. As you know, I enjoy and respect and love your community. So thank you.
Really appreciate it, and it's great to have you as one of our one of our leaders in the community. And yeah, always learn a lot from our discussions as well.
Great.